Welcome everybody to the Existentialist Society in Melbourne, Australia. Existentialism is an umbrella term covering diverse and often conflicting schools of thought. Consequently, we are not agreed on who or what is an existentialist. We simply agree to disagree. Now, I'm David Miller. I'm the Secretary of the Existentialist Society. Our event is being held in conjunction with the Melbourne-based Philosophers Bazaar, as well as the Brisbane-based Philosophy Cafe. Today's speaker is Dr. Usha Sista, and her topic is authenticity. Is it actually possible? Question mark. Usha.
Hello, everyone. It's fantastic to see so many people. I can only see about 12 people on the screen, but I'm sure there are many, many more. We all exist. I won't go into my biographical details here. We can perhaps quiz each other on that a little while later. I will have a presentation. I will have a slide pack, but I'm going to free associate a fair bit. We can have questions and comments for after the session. And I won't be able to monitor the chat right now, but if there are any questions in the chat, I can get to them in a bit as well. All right, so I'm going to start. Sorry, my hand's going to come in the way for a little bit because it's an iPad and I don't like it. I don't know if you can see my, okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yep, we've got it, Usha.
Okay, fantastic. Good. All right. So the question that we are here to ponder is authenticity. Is it actually possible? My contention is that no, it is not. Not as an end product, as a once and for all end product, right? And I'll go a little bit into why I say this. Now, to start off with a little bit of all the different factors that affect authenticity. Annie Wortham was a sociologist in segregated America, and her claim was that authenticity is sacred. It is the one thing that is yours, your story, your life. It is the thing that you die for ultimately, if you have to. It is the only thing that you die for. While a brilliant statement, there are many, many components within this. For example, the notion of the sacred, then the notion that your story belongs to you in a vacuum, or in the sense that there may be contributing factors to it, but still your life is your own. The point about individuality, the point about autonomy, and then it is the thing that you die for, but it is also the thing that you would kill for if you have to, right? So their authenticity, while we talk about it in a generic way as being genuine, as being legitimate, etc., there, and about the individual, authentic individual, etc. There are quite a few influences, and there are quite a few ways in which an individual influences the things around him or her as well. And which is why I go on to say that no, it's not possible to be once and for all authentic, right? Now, authenticity has had a very interesting development because historically, authenticity was about largely doing your part in the world as part of a social structure. So, you're born into a certain class, you're born into a certain community, and then you fulfill your role. You fulfill your obligations as part of that community. For example, if you're born a serf, then you do the things that a serf is supposed to do. As a peasant, you would do whatever the peasant duties are. And there's really nothing beyond that. To go further still, if you look at what is one of the interpretations of the caste system in India, if you were born in an aristocratic family, in the family of the kings, a fitting point to note, given that Australia is going to get a new king coronated today, then you would do whatever the duties and the responsibilities of that stature, that position in life that was essentially an accident of birth. And as long as you fulfill those conditions, you're considered an authentic individual, right? But 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, there was a massive transformation around the world, particularly stemming from the European Enlightenment, French Enlightenment, and human beings increasingly became self-aware in the sense that they came to think of themselves more as individuals rather than placeholders in systems of various social relations and interactions. And society came to be seen not as an organic whole of interacting components, but as an aggregate of individual human beings, right? It's not just different systems interacting with each other where human beings do whatever they're supposed to be doing, but rather individuals who come together and bring about the emergence of a society that has a life of its own. And not quite human. The society itself is not human, but then it's got an artificial construct. So this is your social contract where each one is influencing the other, but the base of the society is not the system per se, but it is the individual. So where the moral advice used to be that one should be, to go with the Shakespearean quote here, be true to thyself, true to oneself in order therefore to be true to others, it very quickly changed into whatever our contemporary notion of authenticity is, basically referring to a way of acting that is choice-worthy in itself. So your thinking, your decisions, your choices themselves are worthy of reflection, and they are a virtue in their own right. It has taken us about 300-400 years to get here. And now we have further interactions and further, well, with the latest buzzword, which I will just use once over here, hopefully never again in this talk, maybe until the discussion, which is your ChatGPT. What does authenticity mean in the light of, what does human authenticity mean now? What does system authenticity mean? What does artificial authenticity mean? So all these questions are up for grabs right now with no clear answer, which in a way was perhaps what it was like in the 17th, 18th century during the French Revolution, right? Now, what this led to is the ethic of authenticity, which basically acknowledges the value of the dominant ethic of autonomy, which is around, you're an individual, an autonomic individual, you have the right and the responsibility to work through your life as you choose fit, as well as bear the consequences for that autonomy, right? So one should strive to lead one's life according to one's own reasons and motives. And we rely on our own capability to follow self-imposed guidelines, right? Now, this presupposes that human beings are rational entities, that all our decisions stem by and large from the ethic of good, from the ethic of virtue, from the ethic of altruism, etc., etc. And if that does not happen, then what we are left with is anarchy and bad moral choices, harmful consequences, etc. Now, it introduces the idea that we have motives, we have desires and commitments, and sometimes these desires and commitments should outweigh the restrictions of rational reflection. What might that mean? It might mean something like, my desire is to be a poet, let's say, but the rational reflection tells me that I need to be able to do a regular job, which isn't writing poetry, to be able to earn enough money, to be able to survive in the world. Now, where is that balance happening? So my desire and motive to do poetry outweighs the restrictions of rational reflection over here, possibly. Or I am born into a certain strata of society. For example, I'm born into a family of doctors, and all the children in the family are to be doctors. That's a restriction, but you get the support structure you need. Your parents are going to get you into the best medical schools, and you have a number of people to help you out, and all those rational ideas are there, but then you don't want to be a doctor. You want to be something else. Now, that intrinsic desire and that commitment to that particular desire is going to outweigh all the restrictions brought on by external society. Now, that is the argument of the ethic of authenticity, right? Now, there are few ways of looking at it. We can look at authenticity in a very simple way, as I will show through a series of images in an illustrated picture book by Peter Barron, I think, right? And then we look at some of the problems that come with looking at authenticity in a very, very Pollyanna kind of a way. To thine own self be true. If you're authentic, that's the greatest thing to happen to you, or it's going to be easy for you. You found your flow, or anything in the life is going to be great from that point on. All these arguments can be contested, and we'll get to that, right? So this is a Peter Brown picture book, which says Mr. Tiger Goes Wild. We have a tiger in a frock coat, possibly walking the streets of London. He looks like a banker to me with his stovetop hat, or this could be 18th century Philadelphia for all we know. And he's grim and he's going about his duties, but he's a tiger. He's not a banker in a stovetop hat looking like a, badly mauled Abraham Lincoln. And he suddenly gets a glimpse of the wild and he's excited about it. And he's looking at it with absolute wonder. Like, isn't this where I'm supposed to be? This is where I'm more at home. And I'm not comfortable in the city. And so this guy gets rid of all his frivolous dressing, and he makes a dash for the natural world, and he lives happily ever after. He looks like a clean-shaven version of Simba in The Lion King, right? Now, this is your more simplistic, a more introductory approach to authenticity. In some ways, Rilke reflected on it, right? When he said that it's a rare person who's able to stay open to the great matters that shape authentic living. Only the person who accepts solitude can place himself under the deep laws of the universe, where he steps into the fresh morning or out into the event-filled evening, and all that is not him falls away, as if he had died, although he stands in the teeming midst of life. Now, so when we have this notion of authenticity, a very simplistic one, it's great for children's picture books to some extent, and in some ways it makes us centered and gets us to reflect on what our essential nature is, what we might want, and things like that. But it also presupposes that there is an inherent nature, there is an inherent sense of who you are, and it's a question of discovering it. Now, is this virtue, is this quality of being authentic something that you discover, or is it something you construct, Or is it something that you do both of, depending on what you're looking at, right? And then once you discover that authentic identity, whatever that might be, are you going to be happy? Or is it going to be an easy ride, walk in the jungle with your head held high? Many a times it's not. And the reason I say that is because you're not living alone in this world. And you're not ahistorical. We are not ahistorical. We are a consequence of all the thousands of years of history and prehistory that have gone before us. And there are multiple interacting components within our lives and outside our lives, which makes it very, very difficult for us to accept a simplistic, straightforward notion of whatever authenticity, whatever your intrinsic motives and desires might be that bring you to a sense of, all right, this is me. This is who I want to be. And this is who I want to be for as long as I live. Right? We don't even make 90-day plans in the workplaces anymore. So to think about something that I would do for as long as I live is perhaps a childish notion now. It worked in the Industrial Revolution, where you might do a trade study, which is what most of our schooling system today still continues to be. But you would pick up the skills that you would need to go and work in the factories or in the other industries, and you would continue doing that for the rest of your life. And that was it brought back to that sense of what your place in society was and what you wanted to do it well. Doesn't hold good very much. And I'm going to take an extreme example here where it went all wrong very badly. There may be slight, graphic images, but there may be some graphic conversation about it. So if I'm offending anyone, apologies straight out. This is a photograph with the mask of Rimbaud in New York, a series of Rimbaud in New York portraits done by a brilliant artist called David Wojnarowicz. David was in the 1960s, 1970s, New York. He lived there. New Jersey, I think that's where he was born. And he lived an absolutely hellish life. He was tormented by his father. He was abandoned by his mother for a long time. And he went through all manner of child abuse. And he was thrown out to the streets at one point, and he also struggled with sexual identity, with drug addiction, and all manner of ills that pretty much plagued New York streets in the 60s and 70s. And when he started finding his way to deal with what life threw at him, he did sculptures, he did installations, and he made these photographs. And Rimbaud is a fitting figure, a poet, a very, very revolutionary, intrinsically revolutionary poet. And we notice that this is the actual person is not David. It's many of his friends took part in this particular project, and the mask is Rimbaud's. And it's very interesting that David chose to use a mask, because a mask is as much to reveal what's on the surface of that particular mask as it is to hide what's underneath that surface. It lets you take on a new persona while at the same time hide what could be your identity. And what better place to do it than New York, which is a city of loneliness, millions of people living and perhaps living in an ocean of loneliness too. Another of his Rimbaud portraits, and this is an iconic photograph of David, where he actually sewed up his lips. He went through the pain of it because it was his ultimate bid to express that he was being silenced. And it wasn't just his silence, it was the silence of all those who wanted to express their sense of identity, whether it were political identity. This was the post-segregation era, whether it was sexual identity, whether it was professional identity, suffrage movements, any of those things. And it was a testament to the pain that not only he went through personally as an individual, but also the collective pain. So the sewing up was an ultimate act of frustration. It was an act of disappointment, and in some ways, an act of rebellion to say, look, this is what is being done to me and to millions of others. And that brings me to the periods, while authenticity is spoken about as a singular entity, it perhaps is better to think about it in gradations and think about it in terms of congruency. So is what I feel aligned with what I think, which is aligned with what I say, which is aligned with what I do? Or is what I feel aligned with what I think, but not with what I say and what I do? Or it's aligned with what I think and what I say, but not with which is outright dishonesty. Or everything is completely different, which is basically foolish. And that would perhaps be authentically foolish in the sense that when there is no filter, then you come across as an absolute fool. And if we think of the Shakespearean times quotes, the only person who was allowed to speak the truth, to express what they felt, what they thought, and do exactly what they felt and thought were the court gestures, and only they were allowed to speak the truth to the king. No one else. The others would perhaps get beheaded. So along those lines, it is possible to be authentic and kind. And I'm using this image, which does say it's possible to be, but I use authentic as a process, as a constant action of adjustment and not an end product. So when I say it's possible to be authentic and kind, it's in the here and now. You may have to adjust your boundaries. You may have to adjust your ideas about yourself and the world as you keep getting new information, right? Without thoughtfulness. And so authenticity, well, quite often does backfire, right? So when what you think and what you say and what you do are congruent, then wise people are kind and judicious in that way. And the jerks are what you express, what you think and feel, and you basically express it without any filter, right? On the other side of the quadrant there, you also have the insufferably difficult people, and the ones who are thoughtful about what they think and say are not congruent with what you are, with what you do. Then you have the people who play politics. You can either do good politics or you can play politics. And so that's the other side of authenticity. Well, and we have Oscar Wilde, who says the first duty in life is to be as artificial as possible. What the second duty is, no one has as yet discovered. So this is the problem, as I said, with authenticity is life is essentially an artificial construct, as much as it's biological, as much as there may be intrinsic motivations, intrinsic desires. But then when pitted against the world around us, when pitted against our own changing responsibilities and requirements in life, then there is much about it that has to be constructed. And it need not mean it is unwarranted simply because it's constructed. There's much in life that we build and work towards. So existentially, yes, there is a bit on Kierkegaard or a Hegelian term of authenticity and autonomy, whether we look at the very famous Sartre and Paul, the core existentialist bit to be authentic and to be good to yourself and live in accordance with what your values are, with what your desires are, etc. It's always going to have to be counterbalanced with the historical demands. And my authenticity may not necessarily mean it's good or right. For example, be true to yourself. I'm sure Hitler was absolutely true to himself. But what did that mean in terms of the world at large? What did that mean in terms of respecting others? What did it mean in terms of respecting the intrinsic human uniqueness and the right to live? So when you pit your authenticity against those of the others, then there is a question of counterbalance. There's a question of whether you must hold back on what you desire, what you believe is good and right for you over what's good and right for the larger group, and where's the balance? Sorry. So my argument again towards that end is, while authenticity is not possible as an end product, it's not something you become and forget about. Yes, it is possible as a process of constant calibration and alignment with your own values and desires and with those of the world that you live in. We're up for discussion now. And I'm going to try and figure out how to stop sharing.
Well, thank you, Dr. Usha Sista, for your presentation on authenticity. Is it actually possible?
Thank you.